Welcome to the Better Business, Better Life show. I'm your podcast host, Debra Chantry-Taylor. In this podcast, I interview business owners, EOS implementers, and business experts who share with you their experiences, tips, and tools to help you create not only a better business, but also a better life. At the end of each show, you will have 3 tips or tools that our guests share that you can implement immediately into your life. If you want more information or want to get in contact, you can visit my website, debra.coach. That's DEBRA.coach. Please enjoy the show. And today I'm joined by Simon Carstens, who's a sales performance expert. Is that right, Simon?
Yes, that's right.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Yeah. So Simon and I actually met through a networking community group that I'm part of called Connected Communities. I guess we've got to know each other over the time. And I thought I'd love to hear some of the things that Simon has to say on the podcast, because I'm sure you'll get huge value from it too. So Simon, welcome to the studio.
Thanks very much.
Love to hear your story of how you got to be a sales performance expert.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it goes way back to the 1990s, actually. I was at university studying a business degree. And during one of the school holidays or the breaks, I looked on the student job search board and there was a role offering commission-only sales roles. And I thought, I'll give that a go. It sounds really interesting. So
that's pretty brave, commission only.
It was. Yeah, I sort of backed myself and it was probably for a bit of experience as well as money. Mm-hmm. And so I bought myself my first briefcase, turned up to this new job and they gave me yellow pages and said, go for it.
That was
it.
It
literally was like that. Told me about the product and there was a guy at the time who talked me through the sale process, but it was incredibly difficult actually going through the yellow pages, looking for businesses, finding the right person, booking meetings, turning up, presenting, dealing with objections and closing. And it was very difficult. To this day, I think it's probably the most difficult job I've ever had, but I really loved it. And I thrived on the excitement. So I decided that's what I wanted to do for a career.
So did that mean you finished the degree though?
I did, yes.
Okay, yep. Because I must admit, I switched sort of midway through a degree and kind of went, this is not what I want to do, and went off to do something else.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't really know what they want to do until they come out of their degree, but I knew at that point. So I got my first sales job and I got a couple of sales jobs after that, which were very similar, actually, having to go out there and find business and close it. I love the thrill of the chase to do with that. So I earned my stripes in New Zealand. At the end of the 1990s, I did my OE, went to London. And where I worked for a number of telecommunications companies. Okay. So that was fantastic training for me. I'd worked for Telecom New Zealand before I left, and with that experience was able to work for a couple of telcos. My first one was WorldCom.
Oh, yeah.
During the good times.
Remember, yeah.
Yeah, so I went through the good times and the bad with them. It was great starting with them. They gave me a lot of formal sales training. It was a pretty disciplined and high-performing sales environment. Mm-hmm. You know, you could be really successful and earn great money if you succeeded, but you'd probably be walked out the door if you didn't. So a lot of pressure, a lot of rewards, and a lot of success financially and otherwise. Mm-hmm. So that was great. Went through the great times with them, and then they became bankrupt. You probably heard the story. And so the economy was starting to suffer at that point. And so the economy started declining. They went bankrupt. So I saw the boom and the bust, and it was really interesting working for companies in those two modes. Yeah, which is
very different modes.
Growth modes, everything's great, going on trips, a lot of enjoyment, made some great friends through those times of austerity. We're paying for our mobiles. We were told we're grateful to have a job. You just knuckled down and you got on with it. Mm-hmm. And then I got my first leadership role. Working for a company called Global Crossing at the time, which was a company coming out of bankruptcy. So I had the opportunity to build teams. It was my first leadership role. So I had to learn how to lead through others as opposed to carrying the bag and selling myself, which was my first big leadership challenge.
Fantastic.
So that was great for me. I studied, did my MBA concurrently. So I was working and studying at the same time.
I've done that. It's hard, isn't it?
It's very difficult. Every minute counts. You know, you're quite accountable. But I had the opportunity to build teams, in particular this team, build a European sales team, pick people, work out what I needed in terms of capabilities, where we were trying to get to strategically with a company and build some quite high-performing teams there. Moved into a corporate part of the same organization and did the same. That was a lot more cutthroat, a lot of hiring, a lot of firing, a lot of pressure. You know, turning up to work in the morning with a knot in your stomach, wondering what's going to happen today and who's going to get fired. And it was pretty grueling, but I think it taught me the basics, you know, in terms of what real selling is like in that hard environment. I was able to hone my craft and be quite successful at it. So that was my UK experience, if you like, developing the skills. Came back to New Zealand around 2009 and worked for a couple of telcos here in sales leadership roles. So very much same story. This Spark Telecom at the time was suffering from intense competition. So it was that environment where you had to get your team up to speed and learn how to compete in an environment where they never had competition before. And then I worked for an IT company for a while where I was selling again, leading a sales team.
Hardware, software, or both?
It was outsourced services.
Okay.
So everything IT that an organization has, whether it be servers, databases.
Yep.
And then I got my first exec role working for a company at the time called Paymark, which is now called Worldline.
Oh, yep.
Yep. So that was another great opportunity of completely transforming the sales team from where they were to where the company was heading, which was to build world-leading products and services, where it was pretty much an incumbent before. They didn't have anything to sell. So another opportunity for me to work out the capability we need, the culture we need, and develop a team and build into high performance. So that's what I've done all my career, and that's what I love the most. And
then you left it, didn't you? And went to work for yourself.
I did, yeah.
Get your own company.
It was really interesting. So how that all happened, it was a collision of a number of things.
Yep.
My last job was for a very large corporation. It was a huge team, about 150 people. It was the first role I've had that it was incredibly difficult on many levels. Culturally, it was very hard to be successful, and I just didn't enjoy it. So I was forced to question my own ability, the company I was working for, the culture, and decided what I really wanted to do.
Yep.
Plus a few personal challenges I had. So it was a chance for me to take a step back. I did a lot of work working through my purpose, what I really loved about the roles, what I loved about what I do, what I'm passionate about, and what I'm great at. And that with those three things, I decided I wanted to build a company that aligned with that, because if you've got your purpose aligned, it doesn't feel like work. It's happy, you enjoy what you do, and you've got the experience, you're great at it. So that comes with confidence. So that's when I decided to set up my own sales consulting practice.
It's actually really interesting. I was actually at the Family Business Association conference yesterday, and one of the family business owners, very large family business, both across Australia and New Zealand, made the point that, your children shouldn't necessarily work in the business. And why I think this is relevant is because he said that if it's not their passion, if it's not what they love, if it's not what they want to do, they're not going to add value to the business. And I think that happens with all of us. We actually have to question, what is our purpose? What do we love? What do we want to do? And ensure that we are aligned with that, because that's when you get the most value, whether it's for your own business or working for somebody else.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And for me at the time, I was chasing the dollar, chasing the role, the title, the hierarchy, and I realized that wasn't important to me anymore.
It's funny how we get to that, isn't it, at a certain age.
Right.
I remember back in the early days of my career, having the title, having the car, having whatever kind of car it was really important. What your title was important. What level of frequent flyer status you were at, all that stuff was important. And these days, I really couldn't give a toss about it.
Well, that's right. And it's been the most leveling experience for me, because in a senior role, people want you. They want to make contact with you. They want to do business with you.
Yeah.
You feel important, and it's you have the power. Whereas here I am on my own, trying to do exactly what they're trying to do, which is get appointments, build business, establish credibility, brand, all that sort of thing. So it's a very humbling experience for me.
You've got to actually, what was the terminology you used? You've got to drink your own
champagne.
Well, that feels like medicine at the time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's probably been the biggest learning for me, actually, is having to carry the bag again, as I call it, which is actually sell myself as opposed to leading teams who sell.
Okay.
And so it's been quite a challenge, actually. Actually getting out there, working through the formula for success.
Yep.
How do I go about things? How do I do things? And I'm lucky enough to partner up with Sandler Sales Training, and they have a very well established what they call a gate selling process. So I've gone through all the sales training with them and know how to sell their services in the way that they've refined over the years and years. In fact, they've been around 60 years. So I've been able to sort of get support and hone my own sales process down to make sure it's as effective as possible, which has been really helpful.
Yeah. So obviously, that's a big switch going from leading a whole team of people who do a lot of the work for you to actually going back into your own business. What do you think the biggest challenge has been?
Oh, there's two for me.
Yep.
One's mindset.
Okay.
I think it's really important. And a lot of the businesses I deal with and individuals as well, it's probably the thing that holds us back the most. It's self-limiting beliefs. It's the head trash, as we call it. It's all the stuff going around in your head.
Yep.
So when you've got a list of people you need to call, you're looking for any excuse not to call them.
I was just sitting here giggling to myself because I actually, it's not just the not calling them, but then you kind of fall into this whole, I'm no good at selling. I don't like selling. And I find myself doing that regularly. And then you have to say, actually, you've got to reposition that, because if you keep saying that, you just actually create that reality, don't you?
100%.
Yeah.
And it's about these self-limiting beliefs. And the more you tell yourself that, the more you believe them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you pick up the phone and make the call, guess what? You're not going to do a great job, are you?
No, that's right. Yeah, I don't believe in myself. How can you possibly believe in me? That's right.
You're
yeah.
going to be waiting for the no, or give them a reason to hang up on you. So you've got to have the confidence. And the one thing I've learned is that it's about the behaviors. You know, it's if we go about these cold calls and we know we've got to do them,
Mm-hmm.
then the behavior drives the attitude. A lot of people think you've got to get the head right, before you do these things. But actually, booking time in your diary, I'm going to make my calls on a Monday morning from 10 to 12 because that's when I'm freshest and that's when I'm going to have the most chance. And I'm going to book it in and I'm going to make the calls and I'm going to hold myself accountable to them.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest lesson, I think, for businesses. And one thing I've learned is you've got to do it and you've got to set up a process to do that.
Yes.
And the second thing's accountability.
Right.
Which is the tail end of that, which is how do I hold myself to account?
Mm-hmm.
In a business, you know, you've got bosses, you've got shareholders, you've got boards, you've got someone else to be accountable to, and you've got your own reputation which drives you.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a one-man band or even a small company, you've got no one checking in on you.
Yeah.
So, you know, what we often do at Sandler, and I do with my clients, is saying, what are all the things that stand in the way of your success? And you'll go through and say, what gets in the way of your average day? Like, I get phone calls from people. Great. You know, I go make a coffee. I had a look at the internet. I look at Instagram. And if you calculate all the minutes adding up to hours of things that are unproductive time, there's a lot of wastage, right?
For sure.
So it's what I do is I book time in my diary on a Friday afternoon and I plan my next week. I put the times in my diary for things that I need to do, making calls, following up, and I plan my week to be as productive as possible. Yep. And then I review that. I review the previous week and go, what did I achieve? Mm-hmm. What didn't I achieve and why?
Yeah, what's working, what's not working. I think also, and we talk about it with the bigger businesses we work with, having a scorecard to actually measure things. I think you still need that even as a one or a two-man band because, again, it gives you some accountability. You can't keep looking at a scorecard every single week and the numbers being read and not be forced to do something about it.
Right, yeah.
Whereas if you're not actually writing it down, if you're not looking at it on a regular basis, then it's very easy to kind of go, oh, yeah, I didn't do it, but I'll get round to it next week. Or, you know, procrastination is a killer.
Yeah, that's right. And what I've done personally, because this is what I need, everyone might be slightly different in terms of accountability and driving their behavior, is I have a call with somebody every Friday for half an hour. Yeah. And we say, great. You know, I'm asked, hey, Simon, what are you going to do next week? What have you committed to doing? And I'll go, well, I'm doing X, Y, Z. And they'll do the same to me. And I know that I've got that call on a Friday.
Accountability coach. Yeah, yeah.
And so they'll find that really effective.
Yeah. I actually did it with one of my EOS colleagues over in Sydney, and we just used to text each other on a Friday. And it was literally, you know, so we'd agreed to do a certain number of what we call VTH calls, which is our sales calls. And we'd actually ask each other, how had we gone? Had we achieved our target or not? And even just knowing that text message was going to come through and that you had to answer it gave you that momentum to kind of keep things going. So it's important. Yeah. Accountability is important. And I always liken it to, it's like having a personal trainer, right, at the gym. For many, many years, I paid for gym memberships and would never go because there was always a reason not to. As soon as I started paying somebody to actually hold me accountable, I now go 3 times a week. They're expecting me. I've paid for it. Guess what? I very, very rarely ever miss a PT session.
Absolutely. And I think forming those habits, probably over time, you may not need the personal trainer anymore. So I think it's getting to a point where it's sustainable.
I might, but yeah, I'm a little bit unique in that respect. Nice. Okay, great. So having to go back to those basics and doing some of the stuff that you're actually helping other people to do, it really is an eye-opener, isn't it? Because I know when I first started my business, which was 20-odd years ago now, yes, I'd always been in other people's businesses, always running large teams, had lots of people to do stuff for me too. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm on my own. I have to do this all myself, or I have to find other people to do it. And working out, you know, who you employ, when you employ them, what they're going to do, all becomes part of that forming a business.
No, exactly. I mean, there's a couple of things on that. Firstly, we like to put together for our clients what we call a cookbook.
Oh, yeah.
Which is they take you through a process of saying, well, what's your goal? And it could be a revenue goal, let's say 100,000. And you say, well, what do I need to do to reach that in terms of the number of opportunities in the pipeline based on my conversions, all the way through to how many conversations do I need to, or even how many dials do I need to make to get through to someone to have the conversation, to have the meeting. So it's a really sort of scientific way of going, this is my activity plan. This is what I need to do to be successful. Yep. And the other thing, which is really eye-opening for everyone when I take them through this, is we look at the working hours in a year. Yep. So if you think about working days, less public holidays,
actual holidays,
plus leave, plus sick days, plus whatever else you need to do in your life. Yep. And how many hours how many days that translates to. it's quite it's
It's
very
quite
few.
scary. Yeah.
So you think, wow, I've got to earn that much money in that length of time, and all of a sudden there's this compelling reason to work
pressure.
harder.
Yep.
And when I do the sums myself, it equals 4 days a week.
Yep.
So you've got 20% of your week is ineffective. Potentially you don't have to make the calls, to generate the opportunities, to close the business. It's like I need to cram in a 4-day week into a 5-day week.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's cool. And it's interesting too. Obviously, we were established businesses, and even businesses have been around for a long, long time, often haven't got that cookbook or that recipe sorted. And it's one of the things we talk about is like, do you know? I mean, I've got a very simple funnel with the consulting business in terms of I know that if I send out 10 traction books to target market audiences, I get 4 initial phone calls. I can then have a conversation with about whether there's some value there for them. 2 of those will book into a more comprehensive sort of meeting around what the tools are, and then one will become a client. So that's pretty simple maths. Once you know that, you can go, right, if I want 1 client per month, what do I have to do? The leading indicator is 10 books going out to target market audience.
Yep.
And if you don't do that, you're never going to get to the 1 client. So, but it's amazing how many businesses haven't actually worked through that. I remember when I first came to New Zealand, I worked for an engineering firm, and all the sales reps out on the road were going out, visiting people day in, day out. And I said to them, so what was the purpose of the call? What did you need to get from that? What does your funnel look like? How are you making sure you get the results? And they just didn't have it. They were just literally wandering around, almost having chats to people. How's the rugby? How's the weather? They didn't have that purpose in mind. Once you get that kind of level of clarity, it becomes easier, I would say. Well, not easy, but easier.
Absolutely. And I call this a playbook.
Mm-hmm.
You think about a recipe. So you go to a restaurant and you have a lovely meal and you think, I'll go home and try to recreate that. And no matter what you do, it may taste okay, but it's not the same.
Yep.
It's not a mouth-watering success. Like, well, how do they do that? And if you think about sales, it's the same. If every salesperson goes into their sales process with a different formula, there's going to be a huge amount of variability. So you might have one, but you extrapolate that out to teams and then multiple teams. It's obvious why teams is overperformers and underperformers, right? So to create that playbook, to create the whole sales stage, right from how we generate leads to how we get meetings to what we do in the meeting, what the objectives are, how we handle that all the way through is essential. So what we're saying is have a recipe for success, a playbook. That doesn't mean people become robots. It means they apply their own skills and abilities to that process to become successful. But it narrows down the variability and creates that recipe for success. So what I always say to businesses and individuals is if you have a playbook and someone comes into your organization, could they learn that quickly, repeat it, and get up to speed really quickly and become effective?
Yeah.
A lot of businesses go, hey, we've hired you. They might go through a rudimentary sales interview process.
Yep.
Here's your phone, here's your laptop.
Off you go. Here's your yellow pages.
Yeah,
Not quite, but
a couple of hours with someone or ride shotgun with other salespeople, but that's just not enough.
Yeah.
And so the learning curve is much longer. And steeper rather than sort of that intensive, right? We're going to put you through this induction program. We're going to get you up to speed. We're going to make sure you're at the right level, and we follow this process, and we've got the KPIs to track you along the way. Yeah. So that's an area I think businesses could do a lot better in.
Yeah. I think if you think about the EOS model, it's one of our core components. We've got 6 key components. One is process, and we say it's your core processes. It's not every single process, and like you said, we don't want to create robots. So it's not actually step by step down to the minute detail, but it is the core process. It's the key of that core process. What are the main steps you have to take? What does that look like? And then that gives the people the chance to know what needs to be done, but they still have the opportunity to humanize that potential. So they can still bring their own flavor to it, but they've got that recipe to follow. And I think I love one of my clients the other day said to me, it's a little bit like, when you're following a recipe to create a pavlova, right? I don't bake particularly well, but if you follow the recipe for pavlova, it's quite specific. You've got ingredients, certain way of doing things, a certain way of whisking it, and then you put it in the oven and rah. And if you change any of those things on the recipe, you will get something, but it's probably not going to be a pavlova. And I thought that is so true of business, right? It's like it's the recipe. Now it means that you can obviously add extra things to it. You can add some strawberries and some blueberries and things at the end to make it your own and make it quite unique. However, you've got to follow that core recipe to get that core pavlova that you can then work with.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a really common trend. I think it's in New Zealand more than I've seen globally, but the view of management is I hire expensive salespeople. They should know how to do their job. And they might in certain environments in the way that they've been trained. which is distinctly different depending on where you've come from, what you do. I've
Yeah.
come from a very formalized training background. I've been through probably 3 or 4 major sales methodologies, and I'm analytical. So, but where some people they'll shoot from the hip and they're really good. They've got the gift of the gab. They know how to deal with people. They can read them really well, but those aren't necessarily replicable.
Yeah.
And so, by creating that playbook, it says, great, here's the way we do things. It's kind of like McDonald's.
Yeah.
Here's the rule book. We know this is really successful.
Yep.
But by the way, if you can do it better, feed back into the process. We can improve that, or you've got a different way.
Yep.
If you're meeting your numbers and they're meeting theirs in a different way, that's fine. But here's what we think is the best way to go about that.
And like you said, that will even out some of those, real high performers and real underperformers. But I suppose it also gives a chance, because if you've got all that in place and somebody's still not performing, so you've got that plus your scorecard KPIs and they're still not performing, then it gives you an opportunity to deal with that in whatever is the best way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got a few different things. You've got the capability of the salesperson.
Yep.
So before you hire them, you should be really understanding what capability you need, depending on your product, industry, the role, how unique the sales process is. It could be a long sales process selling software. That could be, you need someone who's a real strategic salesperson, solution salesperson, versus someone who's a commodity salesperson, someone where demand exists, might be selling food products into a supermarket, for example.
Yep.
So you've got to understand what you're looking for and give them the training relevant to what they're doing and make sure that's standardized.
Yep.
And bring everyone up to the same kind of capability level. And that's the ability to apply that to your sales process to be successful. Yeah. So you've got unlocking the potential of the individuals.
Yep.
And then you've got how that translates to having the right systems and processes in the background to enable those salespeople to be effective. Some research recently from HubSpot said that salespeople only spend around 30% of their time selling. And the rest of the time is internal stuff. It's admin. It's ineffective CRMs if they've got one. There's a whole lot of stuff in the background that's keeping them from having either finding customers, developing opportunities, closing deals.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really interesting point. I know when I first came to New Zealand many, many, many years ago, one of my first roles was sales and marketing for the engineering firm. And I had come from the pharmaceutical industry. So even in my very, very early days when laptops were really only just kind of coming out and we had dial-up internet, we actually had a CRM system that was really powerful. And I loved it. As a salesperson, I loved it because it actually enabled me to plan my day properly, do all the right things, did all the follow-up for me. It was really, really great. And so I've always been used to working in that environment. I came over here, started working with this engineering firm, and I said to them, how do you keep track of what you've just said in that meeting with that client? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, where do you keep track of all this information? Well, I don't. How do you know what you're going to do when you wake up in the morning? How do you know what your plan is? And they really had no systems. And what I've learned is that a lot of people think that CRM is actually an disabler, is that the right word? It's for salespeople, but if it's used correctly, it can be really powerful, I think. Is that what you think
absolutely.
too? Yeah.
Admin's the most common word for it. I have to fill in all this admin, but actually when you unlock the capability of a good CRM, all your emails should be synchronized. So where you send an email from your email, it's from your Outlook, for example, that should be tracked within the CRM. And so every piece of correspondence is tracked. And I follow the adage, you can't manage what you can't measure.
Yeah.
And if you don't know activity, for example, how many calls are we making? How successful are those calls? If you can't track any of that, you can't work out the variability and therefore improve things. So there's a real shift to making sure we've got everything tracked in a centralized way, which tends to be the CRM.
Yep.
So you've got all emails, all correspondences, all opportunities. You've got your KPIs in there.
Your tasks, your next things to do next.
There's no hiding. And in my experience, it's a cultural issue. If you've got a company who's done things the same way without that level of accountability, moving there is a real challenge because they know that there's nowhere to hide, right?
Yeah.
You know where you are, you know how many calls you've made, you know how successful those calls are, moving to meetings, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So but it gives you such insight, right? I mean, the data can be really helpful and really not helpful. But if you actually have the right data and you're looking at it, you can start to see, like my very simple funnel, you can start to see if you're sending out 10 books and the 10, 4, 2, 1, if any of those variables start to change, you have to go, okay, so what's happening and what do I need to do to address that? Because that means something is going wrong somewhere. And that's what data gives you, I think.
Yeah. I mean, an example of that, a client who I worked with ended last year, they installed a new CRM and we worked out some KPIs and we started getting them to track all their information. And we worked out that one salesperson had a 5% conversion rate from having a lead to arranging a meeting, which was the next part of their sales process. The next person was 35%. I was
going to say 5% is really low.
It was really low. And so when that comes up every week in the sales meetings, go, how's that going and how's that working out for you? And we'll go, you have this person, how do you do it? And we'll say, well, actually unpack it.
Yep.
How do you make the call? Who are you trying to get hold of? What's your call script? How do you deal with objections? What are you actually going into that meeting trying to achieve? Whereas this other person was doing everything wrong.
Yep.
And so I would say, great, we can bring you up to speed. Here's an example of that. We can get you on a call. It helps with the training consistency about it.
And there's an opportunity, right? I think people think that you're being monitored by Big Brother, but in actual fact, if you're using it well, it gives you an opportunity to see where you can improve, learn new things. But also, like I said, with me, it meant that I could actually much better organize my day, my week. I knew what I was doing, and that made my whole sales job a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
Less admin.
Yeah, I think getting people to use a CRM is a sale in itself. It's, again, especially with entrenched views about some salespeople just want to be left alone, and anything you do is micromanagement.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of benefits of using it. They can really help them, as you say, manage tasks and manage what they do in an easy way.
Yeah, you can't lose track of things when it's in a CRM. When it says the next action for this client is this, and it reminds you on the day, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I've got to call that person. Yeah.
So I think we're at that stage at the moment within New Zealand as people are starting to move towards high quality CRM systems that fully integrate, but that's a big job. If you make it work properly, because there's gates in there's workflow. Get to this point, need to send that off for a quote or approval. So there's quite often a lot of work to do in the background to get it working effectively. And
I think that's probably the challenge, isn't it? I think a lot of people have gone, okay, we'll get a CRM, and they pick one off the shelf, they just pop it in there, and they haven't thought about what is actually what they wanted to use it for, and how do they use it to the best advantage. So in my opinion, now, in order to install a CRM effectively, is to actually think about your entire process, think about how it's going to support you through that, and then start to build it around that playbook that you said.
And there's some real challenges with that. A lot of people just sign up to the cheaper CRM or one that meets the needs now, and the pricing model will go from here, stepping up to something ridiculously expensive. So they sort of suck you into getting the basic functionality. In some cases is really good, but you haven't considered marketing. What are you doing with lead gen? How does that fit in? How do we track leads? How do we lead score? How do we develop quotes? How do we send those quotes out and get, you can have those docu-signed and put back into the CRM. There's so much technology you can have that integrates. Does it have an app? What happens? What's that user experience when my reps out in front of the customer? Do we want to have pricing and everything linking back to the CRM? So it's sort of looking at, I've done this recently, it's looking at the world of opportunity and narrowing that back down to reality, what's really effective, and making sure there's an ROI, not just it's nice to have, but this is an essential part of what we do because it adds value to our customers, to our team, and it's affordable.
And sometimes that whole ROI, because I encountered this a lot, when people say, oh, but this is going to cost X amount of money, and you go, yeah, but what time will it save you? And if you put a value on your time, what you'll find is that sometimes what looks like a significant cost can actually end up being a cost saving. So it is really important to look at the whole picture and go, well, what real value does this add? Not a nice to have, but if it adds real value and takes away time from you, what do you value your hourly rate at? And so if this can take even an hour away of your week every week, then what does that look like in terms of a saving for the company? I think that's where people often don't think about.
Well, that's a great point. I see that with small businesses in particular, because it's all about cost.
Yes.
And people don't look at what that return could be. And back to that cookbook, actually, if you define it down, it works out what your hourly rate is.
Does it? Okay.
You go, right, I'm worth $200 an hour.
Yep.
That Instagram post I've just read, that's 5 minutes out of my day or half an hour. I've just cost myself an opportunity cost that much money. So I think that's back to the accountability. But just trying to get especially small business owners to see that value, and rather seeing it a cost, to see it as an investment and what you can get back on it.
Yeah, fantastic. And so for larger companies, there's also that, I think I've seen this when I've worked in corporates, right? There is also that thing to go out and buy the biggest bells and whistles, everything there, and then they don't use it too. So that you can go either way, can't you? You can actually go out and buy. I remember I've gone through many Salesforce implementations and also HubSpot as well. And it's like they buy it because it's got all the bells and whistles, but then we're not using even a fraction of what they can actually do. So you need to be careful that you actually have fit for purpose, I suppose is the word I would use.
Yes, that's right. I mean, we know IT failures, it's not down to the usability of it, it's down to uptake. And it's no difference with CRM. So one thing, getting it installed, you've got to create the momentum for change. It is a change project. You've got to get people on board, but it needs the sales leaders, the management, to make sure that compliance is there, that it's used, that people are being followed up on things that need to be followed up on. And once people get used to it, it tends to gain momentum. But if you just install it, leave it, chances are it could be a failure.
Yeah. I think you made a really good point earlier on about, when you bring people on board, it is your responsibility as a leader to actually give them the right training, to manage them and whatnot. We talk about delegate. My mouth is not working today. Been traveling too much. Delegate and elevate, which is where you're looking at, what do you need to get rid of so you can elevate yourself to the highest thing. And some people sort of think that delegate means that you can just abdicate, because abdicate is like, I don't want to do that. Hey, here, you go ahead and do that and just get on with it. Whereas when you really truly delegate, you're actually, you're working out exactly what it is that you want, what the outcomes are that you want from that. You're going to be helping them with the training. You're going to spend time with them to make sure they understand what needs to be done. So how do you help with that?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to hiring, what I really respect about people I'm interviewing is them asking about that. What support will I get when I get onboarded? What I promote with my clients is having a really robust onboarding process.
Yep.
And so it'll be 3 to 6 months, depending on the client, but it will be very robust. So it'll be, detailed about who they're teaming up with. It'll be internal meetings. It'll be understanding the proposition. It'll be the basics for month 1, and month 2, it'll be getting down to the detail, right? What's our elevator pitch? What's yours? Put in your own language.
Yep.
You're going to be shadowing someone. You're going to be making calls. You're going to be going along to meetings. And it all builds to, I'm starting to build and develop the pipeline. Because what tends to happen in a lot of companies is they leave everyone up to their own devices, and then 3 to 6 months later, they're looking at the sales results going,
we've paid all this money and we've got no results.
We've got a problem here.
Yeah.
And the gap between where they are and where they need to be is so wide, a lot of those people just end up failing. They leave, or they get performance managed out. So making sure that there's a robust plan that's progressive with KPIs along the way is really, really important. At this point, we think in your role, you should have a pipeline of X and you should be closing Y.
Yep.
And within 6 months, we expect you to be delivering this number based on the training and support we're giving along the way. And there's accountability to the sales leaders for not helping them with that.
Yeah.
And if they're not performing, it's a matter of what do we need to do to help. And then if it comes a point at which that there's a performance management issue, then that's another area to go down potentially.
I always say that we have a thing called a people analyzer, and a people analyzer is all about identifying those areas where there are weaknesses, and our role as leaders is to absolutely help that person to get back up to being what we would call a plus on that people analyzer.
Yep.
And that's our first thing as leaders. We're there to actually help them get there. If after you've given them all the help, all the training, all the support, then they're not achieving it, then it's time to actually do some performance management. But we've got to take that first step. And I think I see it with a lot of people that I work with. They bring on a salesperson and they go, we've invested all this money, we're paying all this money for this person, they're not doing what they want. And you have to actually ask the question, how have you supported them to get there? So what you're suggesting is that you actually help them to put together a plan for that first 3 to 6 months. They know exactly what the sort of KPIs that they have to achieve and where they would a benchmark of where they would expect to be in the organisation.
And going back to that sort of cultural norm we have about hiring, just leaving them to it.
Yep.
A lot of sales leaders that I see don't feel they've either earned the right or it's their role to coach.
Okay.
And that is the most important thing you can do as a sales leader.
Yeah.
And to do that, you need to be present. You need to be alongside them. You need to be evaluating. You need to be showing them and guiding them towards what they need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what often happens is salespeople after month 2, 3, when they're not being successful, they start to feel stress and they behave in certain ways.
Yeah.
And that could be hiding. It could be, it could be a number of things that are unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but every month where you're guiding them, you're making sure you're benchmarking them against those KPIs and you help supporting them get to where they need to be, then that reduces that tendency a heck of a lot. Mm. But it really is the role of the leader to ensure the salespeople are where they need to be. Rather than sort of, as you said before, abdicating responsibility.
Yeah, I've been guilty of that myself, sadly. Okay, so we've talked a lot about, the sales process or the cookbook, playbook, whatever you want to call it. We've talked about making sure we actually support people when we bring them on board and that we're actually coaching them and leading them to success as opposed to just leaving them to what's it, sink or swim. Yep. What would be the kind of so if somebody's listening to this and they're going, hey, how do I even get started? I know that maybe my sales team isn't performing as well as it should do, or we've suddenly had, particularly in New Zealand at the moment, a bit of a slowing off because of what's going on. What would be the first steps they would take? What are the 3 kind of top tips or things you could advocate for?
Yeah, I think people can do well by looking at their sales process. No one likes the word process, but ultimately we're talking about everything from generating leads. How do I find the prospective customers all the way through to close? Let's analyze it. And I guarantee if you sat down with a team of 5 and asked them what their sales process is individually, they'll all have a different idea.
Yes.
So it's, what do you do today, and analyzing each step that they take and working out what would work really well. And it's when you chunk things down, make them simple, that you you start to realize where the opportunities for improvement are.
Yep.
So an example of that, a small business I'm dealing with at the moment had a 30% close rate, which actually sounds pretty good.
Yep.
But when we went through the way he sold, from generating leads through how does he convert that lead to a conversation, a conversation to a meeting, is he dealing with the right people? Is it the decision maker?
Yep.
Do they have the authority to buy? Do they have a budget? Often budget's left till right at the end to talk about. How does when does the proposal happen? A lot of people give a proposal right up front, and they wonder why they get ghosted. It's that classic, I'm busy, call me back, never happens, right? So what we're able to do is actually just work through each of those stages, call it the gate selling, and say what needs to happen there. What's an optimal process? What are the outcomes you're looking for? When it comes to questioning, how do we question properly? Deep questions, surface pain, what's going on in the business, what it means financially and commercially, but what it means to that individual.
Yep.
So once we really understand that, we know the questions, we know the process, we can build a picture of what's going on and build that ROI model, build the budget step in, make sure we understand that they've got the right amount of money and that we're talking the right language before we move into decision-making process. So what I find is a lot of small businesses in particular, they will spend a lot of time with a prospect, loosely, someone who's inquiring, and they will start talking. They will talk for a length of time, trying to demonstrate credibility in the process, giving a lot of free information away. Now, if you think about every 10 inquiries, you probably only got one or two that are genuinely interested. The rest of them are, they're tire kicking, they're looking for pricing options to make sure they're competitive. So small businesses don't have the time to do all this. So when they look at that sale process and asking the right questions up front, someone did this to me when I was building my website. They first question they asked is, what's your budget? And they said, we don't deal with any clients under $30,000.
Right.
And they're like, well, it's not me. And so that quickly closes it off.
So actually getting to know early is actually really good, I think, isn't it?
Qualifying the ones out that are never going to buy. Are you generally interested in buying, or are you inquiring? Are you a competitor? So actually looking at that sales process really importantly and refining that to make sure all the tough questions that no one likes talking about money, but you've got to ask the question. What were you thinking in terms of price? What sort of budgets? In fact, you don't even use that word, but what sort of money would you have to spend? What's your, what are you thinking in terms of how much this is worth to you? And once you can qualify those people out really quickly and only deal with the ones that are likely to buy.
Yeah. And you gave me a really nice tip before we came into the podcast. Sometimes it's actually okay to give them an out as well, because I think particularly in New Zealand has been my experience. I work between New Zealand and Australia. They're very, very different personalities. Aussies are pretty much upfront. What you get, what they say is what you get. And so they're quite happy to say, no, not interested. That's fine. Whereas I find Kiwis and British people like myself are very much more wanting to keep everybody happy. And so they'll quite happily, say yes when deep down they're not really thinking yes. So actually being able to give them an opportunity to say, hey, look, it's okay to say no. And I'd much rather know that than get into the tangle of months and months of communication, non-communication, ghosting, all the things that go on to get to a no.
Yeah, that's right. I work on this principle: if you feel it, say it. If it feels like they're palming you off, or creating a reason not to do business, then just say. Quite often with clients or people I talk to, they often say, "Hey, let's talk again later." But what they really mean is they're not interested. And that's okay. Is that the case? Yeah. Oh yeah, gosh, you got me off. Thanks, you've given me an out here. And it means, hey, you haven't wasted a whole lot of your time and energy, and probably hope that this opportunity may arise, and it probably helps them out as well. Yeah,
that's great. Okay, so process is one of the most important things. What are the other two things that they should look at?
I think really understanding the capability of the team, the required capability. A lot of people probably don't spend enough time looking at the actual skills required within the role, because every sales role is different. So they'll hire on the other companies they work for, or generalized skills, but really being specific at the hiring stage about the type or the persona of salesperson that you're looking for is really, really important, because once they're in, and as we said before, it's very hard to get them out again. So making sure we've got the right skills and capability.
And that they meet the values of the company as well, of course. So they're actually part of the actual family. Okay, cool.
Last but certainly not least, in fact, this is the number one thing, is making sure you've got the culture right.
Okay.
Culture is really about how things look around here. What's the level of accountability? How high performing is the team? What do we really need to do? You could have all the great skills and capabilities in the world, but if they're not activated, happy and engaged, then your results are going to be lackluster. So it was always actually designing that, using a team to help with that. What are some words you'd use to describe our team, or you aspirationally how we want our team to be? You want to be fun, hardworking, accountable. What's accountable mean? Well, don't let us off the hook. That means if we do something, we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it. And if we don't do it, there might be consequences. So really define in your organization what that culture should be, what you want it to be, how it aligns with your values, and create that rather than let it happen organically. We've all worked in teams, or I've worked in some. It's just amazing. It's magic. It works really well, but it's not designed that way. It's just a whole bunch of people colliding, coming together to create that. And you change a person, you bring someone else in, the culture changes. You bring a new leader in, the culture changes. So it's, having a well-architected culture that drives high performance.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so you work with businesses of all shapes and sizes, don't you? What's kind of your ideal client look like?
Yes, I'm spending a lot of time in the small to medium space at the moment. We definitely through Sandler we can deal with small, medium, and large, because sales, B2B type sales can apply to any industry, and so we can apply the methodology and framework in the uniqueness that the clients have. So we'll look at their unique business and their market and apply the same framework to their organization. So right across the board, and any vertical either. So it's right across the board.
Okay, perfect. And if they want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to get hold of you?
Probably take a look at my website. elevatesales.co.nz.
Okay, Elevate Sales. Okay, perfect. We'll make sure that's in the link down below as well. And I've got an interesting question for me personally anyway. This whole commission-only salesperson thing. Because I know that, and particularly in that small, medium-sized business, people are going to go, I don't want to pay a huge salary for a salesperson. And I've even heard of people who want to cap commission. And that does my head in, because I kind of go, why would you cap commission? At the end of the day, if they're bringing in more sales for you, and as long as it's profitable, then it makes sense to continue to pay them the commission. But some people believe that, commission-only sales is the way to go, because that way, if they don't work, we don't pay for them. What's your view on that?
Oh my gosh, I've worked with designed and been involved in commission plans for years and years, and you have professors that design them.
Oh, really?
Well, it's based on human behavior, essentially. But no two commission plans are the same, is the first point.
Right.
So you're looking at a broad spectrum of commission only through to zero commission. Last company I worked for took away commissions.
Oh, wow.
Banks have taken away commissions recently. So there's definitely a move towards commission's a dirty word.
Right.
But essentially, you need to look at the strategy and what you're trying to drive. What are the objectives you're trying to drive, and how do you model the behavior? In other words, how much base salary do you have versus the
at-risk component? Yep.
And yes, there are some roles. When you're selling a one-off thing, it's a churn and burn. Like if you've got a churn and burn product, you're selling a widget. You need to call people need to call, sign up, and move on. Commission only is fantastic.
Right.
Where you've got a more strategic sale that's longer, you want a more customer intimate relationship where they're invested in the client and the outcome on a long-term basis. You don't want that, because you're going to get someone who's going to just destroy everything. They're going to do whatever they can, stamp on whoever they like. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but stamp on whoever they like. Probably bad for culture in the organization as well. That's where salespeople get a bad rep. So you've got to look at where you are on that continuum and what's going to work best for you and the customer.
That makes perfect sense. And then the very last question is around hunter versus gatherer. The whole, can you get both in one person, or are they quite distinct?
Absolutely. A lot of people talk about them being separate. I like to talk about hunting with a shotgun. Sorry, farming with a shotgun.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah. So
you're great at nurturing accounts and getting the best, but you also need to be looking for opportunities in those. So yes, I think you absolutely can get those skills. But it's a matter of, again, working out the capabilities you need. If you've got a large strategic account, you should have the ability to manage accounts and spend a lot of your time nurturing those and making sure that customer satisfaction's in there and there's a partnership. But you also need to be looking for opportunities at the same time to retire, and hopefully got the capabilities to retire those in terms of process. Some bigger organisations will you will hand that across to somebody else, a business development
particularly person. If it's a very technical kind of business as well. It makes sense to have somebody who really is the technical expert who can then actually nurture that relationship and farm it moving forward. But the hunter goes out and creates the opportunity. So,
correct,
but that can happen. It can be in both. Okay, that's really cool. Awesome. Some real gold in there. My mouth is not working well today, but I appreciate you sticking with me. And thank you, Simon.
It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah. And if you want to get in contact with you, it's elevatesales.co.nz.
Right.
And we can also find you on LinkedIn, I guess, under Simon Carstens. Yep. Perfect.
Brilliant.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks for listening to the podcast show, Better Business, Better Life. My name is Debra Chantry-Taylor. I'm an EOS implementer, family business advisor, business and leadership coach, podcaster, and speaker. However, I'm also a business owner with several current business interests. I'm fortunate to have lived the high life with all the lifestyle, the toys, you name it, and then I've lost it all, not only once, but twice in 2 spectacular train wrecks. I know what it's like to experience the highs and lows. I came across EOS when they launched into New Zealand using my Entrepreneurs Playground and Event Centre in Parnell, Auckland. I love the simplicity of the tools, and their philosophies fitted my personal brand statement perfectly. The brilliance is in the simplicity. I've always been passionate about seeing entrepreneurs lead a life they love, and now I help them live that EOS life, doing what they love, with people they love, making a huge difference in the world, being compensated appropriately, and with time to pursue other passions. If you want more information or want to get in contact about using EOS in your business, you can visit my website at debra.coach. That's www.debra.coach. Thanks for listening.